Adam Soos here for Rebel News. By now you're no doubt aware that the government of Alberta has put forward policies affirming parental rights under the leadership of Premier Danielle Smith. Included among these policies are restrictions on hormone gender transition therapy for those under the age of 15, prohibition of top and bottom transition surgeries for anyone under the age of 18, insistences that parents must opt into sex education for their children.
For minors age 17 and under, top and bottom gender reassignment surgeries will not be permitted. For children age 15 and under, puberty blockers and hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment or affirmation will also not be permitted.
In addition to restrictions that would prevent female athletes from ever having to compete against biological males.
Our government also needs to deal with the emerging issue of the unfair disadvantages that young women and girls are experiencing when competing with biologically stronger transgender female athletes in sporting competitions. I strongly believe that those who were born male but have transitioned to or identify as female are owed the opportunity to meaningfully participate in sport. However, there are obvious biological realities that give transgender female athletes a massive competitive advantage over women and girls.
Now, to say the very least, the backlash to this has been substantial. There's been a massive response on the left, on the progressive side. People are absolutely apoplectic. Many of them were apoplectic before the policies even came out. There's a pretty large contingent, I would think, from folks that I've spoken with in the middle who feel that this strikes something of a balance. And then there are no doubt people on the other side of the spectrum altogether who feel that this doesn't go far enough to tackle sort of woke gender ideology and progressivism within schools and within the province. Well, to get his opinion on this contentious issue in a few moments, I'm going to be joined by the head of the Alberta Parents Union, Jeff Park.
We have a transgender woman named Lois Cardinal who, after 2 years, started her transition at age 19 and received bottom surgery 2 years later. And this is her words. She says, "As I lived with shame and regret for 14 years, I came to realize it wasn't just myself to blame. It was the psychiatrists in Edmonton, the doctors in Montreal. They kept persuading me, despite my serious misgivings."
Does this policy, or these policies that are being advanced, they seem to strike the right balance?
Yeah, so I think so. The what I was impressed with by the policies that were announced is how thoroughly and carefully they went through a lot of the very things that parents have been bringing to us for about the last 2 years, and addressing a lot of the concerns that we had been hearing. So I think so.
Are there some ways, or have you heard concerns, like does it miss the mark in some ways? And we'll get into some more specifics, but just broadly speaking.
So we thought that we are very excited about the supplementary materials being addressed. That was something that we were really highlighting as one of the real issues in terms of sex education and gender ideology and so forth, were those supplementary materials. We're really glad to see that addressed. But we actually said that doing that through direct approval from the ministry was probably not the way to go, because it would be impractical, frankly. And I mean, that's only as good as the minister. And I have no doubt that they fully intend for the current minister to be right on top of this, but you can imagine a future minister not so much. So what we wanted was actual proactive disclosure to parents. We thought that would actually be more effective than approval from the ministry. But for the most part, we've only received positive feedback. Our position is that any of these things are fine. We're not taking a position on the content itself. We're taking a position on the parents' involvement in that content, and we do want parents, even parents who, as strange as it might seem to your audience, want more of this kind of content. We want them to be able to get it. That's why we support choice in education. We support money following the child, and we support parental involvement and parental authority over all areas. Is we want parents to get more of what they want and less of what they don't want from the education system, no matter what their viewpoints are.
Well, if someone wants to send their child to a very conservative Muslim charter school, or they want to send their kid to Camp Firefly, you're saying parents know best. It's not the government's place to weigh in. Is that not a pretty common sense sort of statement?
Well, and it's been the Alberta model. Is we from the very beginning with the Alberta Act, with Protestant and Catholic schools and Francophone schools, down through Alberta introducing charter schools, being unique in Canada for that, down through even having notification only, no funding home education, which is again another unique attribute for Alberta. We've always been pushing the boundaries of making sure that parents can be more involved, have more options, and see more innovation that way, more of what parents want and less of what they don't. Absolutely. It's remarkable to me that so many people who supposedly listen to people for a living, people in your own profession, in the media, politicians, union leaders, all of whom supposedly listen to people for a living, just haven't heard the wild unpopularity of the policies they've been pushing this entire time. It's actually remarkable to see how blind and deaf they have been to the people they're supposedly listening to for a living.
I'm very troubled by what they're talking about. You know, there are complex issues in there, but they have reached in to an area that is broad and complicated around ensuring that a whole range of medical interventions are managed in a way on a sport by sport basis that ensures competitiveness. They've reached in and pulled out one example and lifted it up as the dog whistle that this is really meant to be. And so it's very inconsistent. And the starting point for me is that a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man.
Should parents be concerned that there are schools where, and I know Dr. James Lindsay weighed in on this, like they'll take a math question and they'll make it about gender. They have to insert it into every little thing. Is this sort of pushing back against that and reestablishing some normalcy, sticking to traditional education, not radicalization and politicization?
Well, absolutely. And before these new policies come into effect, and they still do, we're going to need legislation to see these policies come into effect. The status quo is that parents only need to be told and given opportunity to opt their child out if sex and gender education is the primary purpose of a classroom lesson. So those are the two ways that so frequently that Alberta law has essentially been evaded.
Right.
Notification requirements have been evaded at this point. Is they do it outside the classroom, or the Alberta Teachers Association, for instance, has a resource called the PRISM Toolkit, PRISM, as in the thing that turns white light into a rainbow, that teaches teachers how to do exactly what you were mentioning from James Lindsay, how to take a math question and make it something where all the students will want to talk about is the gender assumptions that they made in the math question, and then they feign ignorance. Oh, I had no idea that that's all the students were going to want to talk about, as if they've never met a student.
On this issue, should parents be concerned about that? Because on one hand, you have someone trying to at least nominally affirm parental rights, and then on the other hand, you have massive unions taking funding from tons of teachers, some who may or may not agree with this, becoming politically active.
Yes, I will note that technically speaking, the unions are not organizing these protests. They're being organized by their allies in probably federally funded interest groups, but certainly speaking at these events and promoting these events heavily. I think every member of the Alberta Teachers Association's Provincial Executive Council has put out on their social media at least one, many times multiple of these I guess they're not counter protests, of these protests, and also some of them, by the way, were promoting the counter protests to the Leave Our Kids Alone protests back in the summer, which is why that the word counter protest came to mind. So yes, they've been deeply involved in this, and again, what value is this providing to their members?
Yeah.
Like how it's been interesting to watch them say that they needed to be consulted about this ahead of time. Yeah. I understand that it absolutely affects the classroom, but frankly, we don't consult police officers before we determine the rights of the accused, and we don't have to consult the teachers union before we determine the rights of parents. That's parents that need to be in on that consultation.
How concerned are you about the fact that every time one of these people takes to the stage and says, children are going to die because of this, and the government is attacking and targeting our children, and this government is harming children. That to me is the most alarming language, and it creates an environment of anxiety, tension, and stress for kids who should be quite rightfully sort of separated from this, protected from this.
This isn't a question about parental rights. This is about keeping kids safe. This is a unilateral ideological move by Danielle Smith and the UCP government to marginalize kids, to other them, and to out not just trans and gender non-binary kids, but all queer kids. You're going to go to a school as a young queer kid or a gender questioning kid and now have to look over your shoulder to wonder which of your other students are going to out you so that they call your parents. Nobody calls you when you join the chess club. Nobody calls your parents when you join the basketball team. Nobody calls your parents when you join the debate team. But now, if somebody thinks you're questioning or queer, they're going to tell the teacher, and the teacher's got to call the parents.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, all we're saying is that about some of these most contentious issues, that it's better to include more people who love the kid, not fewer. And it's especially better to include the people who love the kid the most, who are the most invested in their sexual health, in their history, in their future, in their history and their future, and who are the most invested in what they'll learn, what they'll be able to do with their lives. Parents are the ones who have the responsibility, and it's so frequently said now. I have to laugh that parents don't have rights; parents have responsibilities. Well, in our system, in Western law, having responsibilities is how you get rights. You have responsibilities that you can't delegate to the government, that you can't delegate to someone else. That's why you have a fundamental right, in as much as you have a right to worship as you please in Canada. That's because we think that you have a non-delegable responsibility to worship rightly, and that's between you and God, not the government, not anyone else. In the same way, parents have a responsibility to raise up our own children, to educate our own children, that absolutely we can hire people to help us with, but we fundamentally cannot give it away to someone else. And that, and so yes, we have deep and abiding responsibilities, and that's where the rights to make the decisions about our own children come from.
Hey, if you agree that parents love their children more than the government or a teacher ever could, and if you are sick of progressive activists pushing their radical ideologies within classrooms, well, check out all of our coverage on this contentious issue at stopclassroomgrooming.com.